The sun barely pierced the dense canopy of trees as Emma stood at the edge of the forest. It had been years since she had last set foot in this place, but the memories were as vivid as ever. The Whispering Pines, a vast stretch of ancient trees, had always been a place of both beauty and fear. As a child, she had heard tales of the eerie voices carried by the wind, whispers that seemed to come from the very heart of the forest. But back then, the whispers had been nothing more than stories to her. Now, as an adult, they felt like something more, something real, something that had called her back. The village she had grown up in was small, quiet, and isolated. People rarely spoke of the forest, but everyone knew it was there, lurking just beyond the village's borders. And no one ever ventured too far into its depths. Emma had been one of those who never dared to stray from the edge, but she had heard the stories, the strange disappearances, the unexplained sounds, and the eerie feeling that clung to the trees as if they were alive. But today, it felt different. The wind was still, the air heavy with an unspoken tension. Emma knew she had to go deeper. She had to confront what she had left behind, what she had tried to forget. The years of pain, betrayal, and loss had left scars deeper than any wound she had ever known. And though she had tried to move on, something inside her still felt broken, still haunted by the past. As she stepped onto the narrow, overgrown path that led into the heart of the forest, she felt the weight of the place press down on her. The trees towered above, their twisted branches interlocking to form a canopy that blocked out the sky. It was as though the forest was closing in around her, the shadows growing darker with every step. With each footfall, the air seemed to grow colder, the silence more oppressive. The only sound was the crunch of dry leaves beneath her boots, the occasional snap of a twig breaking in the distance. And then, just as she was beginning to wonder if she had made a mistake, she heard it. A soft whisper, so faint that it could have been the wind, but it was there, unmistakable. Emma, her heart skipped a beat. She froze, straining to listen, but there was nothing more. Only the silence, stretching out before her, thick and suffocating. She shook her head, trying to dispel the feeling that had crept into her chest. She had been hearing things. The wind had a way of playing tricks on the mind. But deep down, she knew it wasn't just the wind. Emma took another step forward, and then another. The path grew narrower, the underbrush more tangled, until she was forcing her way through thick vines and low-hanging branches. The whispers were louder now, more distinct, but they still weren't clear enough for her to understand. It was as though the forest was speaking to her in a language she didn't know, urging her deeper into its shadows. Finally, after what felt like hours, she reached a clearing. The trees parted, and for a moment, she could see the sky again, the faintest hint of light breaking through the clouds. But there, in the center of the clearing, stood a figure. A woman, her features obscured by the shadows. She was tall, her form barely visible against the backdrop of the dark trees. But there was something about her that was familiar, something Emma couldn't quite place. "Do you remember me?" The voice was soft, barely a whisper, but it sent a chill down Emma's spine. She took a hesitant step forward, her breath catching in her throat. The woman's face was still hidden, but the voice, it was unmistakable. It was a voice from her past, from a time she had buried so deep that she had almost forgotten it. "Who are you?" Emma asked, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and recognition. The woman stepped forward, and the shadows seemed to part for her, revealing her features. She was older now, but Emma could still see the familiar warmth in her eyes. It was a face she had once known so well, a face she had loved and lost. "I am who you left behind," the woman said softly, a sadness in her voice. "The forest has waited for you, Emma. It's time for you to remember." Emma's heart pounded in her chest as the woman's words echoed in her mind. She had left it. She had walked away from everything, her family, her friends, and the love she had once shared with this woman. But she had done so for a reason that had consumed her every thought and kept her from returning to this place. But now, standing in the clearing, she felt something stir inside her. The forest had always been a part of her, had always called to her in the darkness. And now, she realized that it wasn't just the forest she had been running from. It was the love, the pain, and the memories that had been buried beneath the surface. The woman smiled gently, her expression softening with understanding. You don't have to run anymore, Emma. The past will always be a part of you, but it doesn't have to define you. Emma felt tears welling in her eyes. She didn't know what to say, how to process everything that was happening. The forest had never felt this alive, this personal. It had always been a place of mystery, of whispers and shadows. But now, it felt like something more, a reflection of her own heart, of everything she had lost and everything she had yet to find. With trembling hands, Emma reached out, her fingers brushing against the woman's outstretched hand. The touch was warm, grounding. And for the first time in years, Emma felt something stir deep within her, a flicker of hope, of healing. The whispers in the trees grew softer, almost comforting, as if the forest itself was acknowledging the truth. Emma had come home, not to the village, not to the place she had once known, but to herself. And in the heart of the whispering pines, she would learn how to love again. The soft rustling of the trees seemed to fade as Emma stepped further into the clearing, her hands still trembling as it held onto the woman's. The air grew heavy, thick with the weight of everything unsaid, every choice made in the past that had led to this moment. The woman before her, Lena, was the key to it all, yet the reasons for their separation remained locked deep inside Emma's chest. Lena had been her everything. In the quiet village where they had grown up together, their connection had been undeniable, soulmates in every sense of the word. But betrayal had come in the form of something unspoken, a choice made by Emma that had fractured their bond beyond repair. Or at least, that's what Emma had told herself in the years following their fallout. Lena's eyes, now filled with a mix of pain and understanding, met hers. You think you can hide from me forever, don't you? She asked, her voice quiet yet sharp. Emma recoiled slightly, feeling the sting of the words more than she expected. I didn't know how to come back, she whispered, her eyes welling with unshed tears. The weight of the years between them hung heavily in the air, a burden she hadn't realized she was still carrying. Lena didn't respond immediately, only stepped back, her gaze never leaving Emma. The forest around them seemed to hold its breath, waiting as though anticipating the inevitable. Emma turned to glance at the other side of the clearing, where a lone figure stood near the trees. A tall man, his broad shoulders barely visible beneath the thick cloak of shadows. His face was obscured by the angle of the light, but there was something unmistakable about the way he held himself, something Emma couldn't quite place. Who's that? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper, but Lena's eyes followed Emma's gaze. That's Noah, Lena said, her tone colder now, more distant. He's a part of this now. Emma frowned. Noah had been a name she had not heard in years. The memory of him was as hazy as a dream, a memory from a time she had buried. He had been one of the few who had stayed in the village after Emma left. But the details of his life were lost to her. Had he been a friend? Or something more? Noah stepped forward, the edge of his face illuminated by the faint light filtering through the trees. He had the same sharp jawline Emma remembered from their youth, but his eyes, they were different now. Harder, darker, as if time had carved away the warmth that had once been there. I see you've come back, Emma, he said, his voice deep and controlled, though there was an unmistakable edge to it. I wasn't sure you'd ever show your face here again. There was something in his words that made Emma uneasy. His gaze lingered on her, studying her like an equation he was trying to solve. I didn't expect to, Emma replied, swallowing the knot in her throat. But I had no choice. Lena shifted slightly, her expression unreadable, but Emma could feel the tension rising between the three of them. Something was off. She didn't know if it was the weight of the past pressing down on her or the growing realization that something larger than herself was at play here. But there was no denying the way the three of them seemed to be drawn together by invisible strings. Noah's eyes flicked to Lena, and for the briefest of moments, Emma caught a glimpse of something, anger, jealousy, maybe even resentment, before he turned his attention back to Emma. You're not the only one with secrets, Emma, Noah said, his words biting. The past has a way of coming back, whether we're ready or not. Emma's heart skipped a beat as she tried to decipher the meaning behind his words. What was he trying to say? And what did he know about her past? More importantly, what did he and Lena know that she didn't? Lena remained silent, her gaze shifting between Emma and Noah. She didn't seem surprised by his words, almost as if she had expected him to speak. But Emma didn't know how to respond. The air was thick with unspoken history, too many secrets and too many questions. "Why are you here, Noah?" Emma finally managed to ask, her voice trembling despite her attempt to keep it steady. Noah's lips curled into a faint smile, though it was laced with bitterness. "I'm here because there are things that need to be settled," he said. "Things that were left unresolved. And it's time to face them, all of us." Emma felt a cold chill creep up her spine. The forest, once so familiar, now felt suffocating. She couldn't ignore the feeling of being trapped in the middle of something much larger than herself. Lena and Noah were both tied to this place, tied to the past she had tried to escape. And yet, here she was, drawn back to the one place she thought would never be her home again.
Lena's voice broke the silence, soft but firm. "Noah's right. There are things we need to confront. The forest is waiting for us. And so are the answers." Emma's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice now tinged with a mix of fear and frustration. Noah stepped closer, his presence imposing, his eyes sharp. "The whispering pines aren't just trees, Emma. They're a part of this, of everything that happened." He glanced toward Lena, his gaze lingering for a moment before returning to Emma. "And so are you." The words hung in the air, as heavy as the silence that followed. Emma felt a sudden surge of panic. The forest, she had never believed the stories. But something in Noah's voice, something in the way he spoke, made her question everything she had once thought to be true. What had she stumbled back into? And what were Lena and Noah hiding? The tension between them was palpable, the air thick with the weight of past mistakes, lies, and regrets. Emma didn't know who to trust, didn't know who was hiding what. But one thing was certain. The forest had a hold on them all, and the answers to the mysteries of their past lay deeper within its shadows. As the wind picked up once again, a low hum filled the air, as though the forest itself was speaking, whispering of things buried long ago, waiting to be uncovered. The clearing was colder now, the shadows growing longer as the last remnants of daylight faded. Emma could feel the weight of the silence between them, heavier than before, thick with unspoken words and unresolved history. Every step she took seemed to echo louder in the stillness, as though the forest itself was listening, waiting. She turned to Lena, her heart pounding in her chest. "What's going on here? What do you mean the forest is waiting for us?" Lena's eyes, dark with unspoken memories, flickered toward Noah. For a brief moment, Emma caught a glimpse of something buried deep beneath the surface. Lena wasn't just conflicted, she was scared. But why? Noah stepped forward, his hand brushing against the rough bark of the nearest tree, as though seeking some kind of comfort. "You still don't get it, do you, Emma?" His voice was steady, yet there was a bite to it now, an edge that hadn't been there before. "It's not just the forest we're dealing with. It's the things we've hidden away, the things we've buried so deep that we thought we could forget. But the forest remembers." Emma swallowed hard, her mind racing. She could feel the tension building, the air so thick it was almost suffocating. "What are you trying to say?" Noah's gaze never left hers, his expression unreadable. "You're the reason we're all here," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You brought this on us. You were the one who walked away." The words hit Emma like a slap. She opened her mouth to argue, but before she could speak, Lena's voice cut through the silence, sharp and accusing. "You don't get it, do you?" Lena's voice trembled with anger and betrayal. "You think we're here because of you?" "No. You think we're here because of him." She pointed at Noah, her finger trembling as it aimed in his direction. "No, Emma. We're here because of me." Emma's chest tightened. "What are you talking about?" Lena's eyes burned with a fierce intensity as she took a step closer to Emma. "The truth is, I've been hiding something. Hiding it from both of you. And I should have told you a long time ago. But I didn't. And now, we're all caught in this." She took a deep breath, as though steadying herself. I was the one who made the deal." Emma's mind spun. trying to process the weight of Lena's words. The deal? What deal? Lena's eyes glinted with something darker now, something Emma had never seen before. The pact with the forest. I didn't just walk away, Emma. I bargained with it. Her voice cracked with the pain of long-buried guilt. I thought I could control it, use it, but it doesn't work that way. And now, the forest is taking its toll. On all of us. The forest, the very thing that had always been a silent, looming presence in their lives, was somehow connected to all of this. But the revelation hit Emma like a punch to the gut. Lena, her closest confidant, had made some kind of deal, a bargain with something so ancient and dangerous that it was now coming for them all. She turned to Noah, searching his face for answers. "You knew about this?" she asked, her voice rising in disbelief. Noah's expression remained unreadable, but there was something in his eyes, a flicker of hesitation. "I knew enough," he said slowly. "I knew she made the deal, but I didn't know the full cost until it was too late. Until the forest started taking things from us, things we couldn't get back." Emma's stomach twisted with fear. What did it take? Lena's gaze fell to the ground. It doesn't take what you expect. It doesn't take just your soul or your life. It takes something more. Something you can't even imagine until it's already gone. Noah took a step forward, his hand brushing the back of Emma's shoulder as he spoke. "And that's why we're here. To make it right. To fix what was broken. But we don't have much time."
The words hung in the air, the weight of them pressing down on Emma's chest. Her mind was racing, trying to make sense of everything. Lena's betrayal, Noah's role in this, the forest that seemed to loom over them like a predator waiting to strike. "I can't fix this," Emma said, the words slipping from her mouth before she could stop them. "I don't even understand it." Noah's gaze softened, a flicker of sympathy crossing his face. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared. "You don't have to fix anything," he said, his voice low and urgent. "But you're a part of it. You always were." Lena's eyes narrowed. "You still don't understand, do you? You're the key, Emma. You've always been the key." She stepped closer to Emma, her voice trembling with a mixture of anger and desperation. "I thought I could save you. I thought I could save us. But it's too late. The forest has already claimed us. And now, it's time to pay the price." Emma staggered backward, her breath catching in her throat. "No," she shook her head, the words barely escaping her lips. "No, I didn't ask for this." Lena stepped toward her, her face twisted with emotion. "None of us did. But it doesn't matter now. The only thing that matters is that we're all tied to it. And if we can't figure this out, if we can't fix what I started, then the forest will take everything." The air grew colder still, the wind picking up as if to reinforce Lena's words. The trees seemed to bend and sway, the whispers of the forest growing louder, like the murmurs of something ancient, something sentient. Emma's mind spun with confusion and fear, her heart racing. The pieces of the puzzle were slowly coming together, but the picture that was emerging was one she wasn't ready to face. She had thought she was here to resolve old wounds, to make things right with Lena, to return to a place that had once been home. But now, the truth was clear. The forest was no mere backdrop to their lives. It was a force of its own, one that had claimed them all, and they were powerless to stop it. And Lena? She wasn't the friend Emma had always known. She was a stranger now, a woman who had made a dangerous deal, a deal that had sealed their fates. The wind howled through the clearing, the whispers growing louder, more insistent. The forest was awake now, and it was waiting. The moonlight filtered through the trees, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch and twist with the wind. Emma stood frozen, her heart pounding in her chest, her breath coming in shallow gasps. The revelation from Lena felt like a weight pressing down on her, suffocating her. The forest, once a comforting backdrop to their lives, now felt like an oppressive presence, watching, waiting. Lena's words echoed in Emma's mind. "You're the key, Emma. You've always been the key." They rattled in her head, refusing to be silenced. It wasn't just the forest that was closing in on her. It was everything. The years of silence between them, the hidden emotions, the secrets buried so deep that they felt like a foreign language. She thought she understood the nature of betrayal, But this was something else entirely. Her hands trembled as she clenched them into fists at her sides, trying to steady herself. She could feel the sting of the night air against her skin, but it did nothing to cool the fire rising within her. Anger, confusion, and fear swirled in her chest, a storm that threatened to burst forth at any moment. "How could you do this?" Emma's voice cracked as she turned to face Lena, her eyes wide with disbelief. "How could you make a deal with something that—" Her words felt hollow, like they were slipping out of her mouth without her consent, as if they weren't even hers to say. Lena didn't flinch. Her gaze was hard, distant. She didn't offer an apology, didn't try to explain. Instead, she just looked at Emma, her face a mask of sorrow and something darker, something Emma couldn't quite place. "I did it to protect you," Lena whispered, almost as though she were speaking to herself more than to Emma. "I thought it would fix things. That we could move forward, that we could be free." "Free." Emma's voice rose with the word, her hands uncurling as the tension in her chest grew unbearable. "Free from what?" "From me." Lena's eyes softened for a moment, and in that fleeting instant, Emma saw the woman she had once called her best friend, the girl who had shared her dreams, her fears, the late-night confessions and secrets they had vowed would never leave their lips. But that woman was slipping away, fading into someone she no longer recognized. "It wasn't about you," Lena said, her voice quiet but firm. "It was about survival. It was about keeping us safe when we were too weak to do it ourselves." The words stung, sharper than Emma expected. Too weak to do it ourselves? Was that how Lena had always seen them? Did she think they were incapable of surviving without the forest's influence? Was Emma not strong enough to handle the truth, to bear the weight of what had been lost? Lena stepped closer, her expression twisted in frustration. "I didn't want you to know this way, Emma. I thought—" She stopped herself, her breath catching in her throat. For the first time, doubt flickered in her eyes, as if she were questioning her own choices. "You thought what?" Emma snapped, the anger surging through her like wildfire, consuming everything in its path. "You thought I'd just forgive you? That I'd be okay with this?" Lena's lips parted, but the words wouldn't come. Emma saw it then, the guilt that had gnawed at Lena's insides, the weight of the decision she had made. It wasn't just the forest that had taken something from them, it was Lena herself. She had been carrying this burden alone for so long that she had convinced herself it was better to shoulder it than face the truth. The truth. Emma clenched her jaw, the pain of betrayal surging through her, sharp and visceral. She wanted to scream at Lena, to accuse her of being selfish, of ruining everything. But the words caught in her throat, replaced by a deep ache in her chest that seemed to expand with every beat of her heart. Behind her, Noah stood motionless, watching the exchange with a quiet intensity. His face was unreadable, but Emma could see the tension in his body, the way his shoulders were rigid, his fists clenched. It was clear he was holding something back, just as he always had. She turned to him now, her gaze piercing. "And you? What about you?" Her voice was strained, raw with emotion. "You knew what Lena had done. You knew all of this. Why didn't you tell me?" Noah flinched, his eyes flickering with a mix of guilt and something else, something darker that Emma couldn't quite name. He opened his mouth as if to speak, but no words came. "I didn't think you could handle it," he said finally, his voice low and rough, like he was choking on the truth. "I didn't think any of us could." Emma's chest tightened. She could feel the coldness creeping into her bones, but it wasn't the night air. It was the realization that the people she trusted most had lied to her, kept secrets that had bound them all to the forest in ways she couldn't fully understand. The silence that followed was suffocating. Each breath Emma took felt heavier than the last, like her lungs were filling with lead. Her fingers were numb, and her mind raced with 1,000 thoughts, none of them making sense. Every answer she had sought for years, every question about why things had fallen apart, why she had left, why Lena had become so distant, had led her here, to this place where the truth felt like a lie. "I didn't leave because I didn't care," Emma whispered, her voice shaking with the weight of her own confession. "I left because I couldn't breathe anymore. Because I couldn't keep carrying the weight of all your secrets." Lena's eyes softened then, a tear slipping down her cheek. "I didn't know how to fix it. I thought this would work. Emma felt the lump in her throat grow, choking off the rest of her words. She wanted to hold on to the anger, to let it burn away the pain. But it was too much, and the truth felt too raw, too real. For a moment, everything felt like it was crashing down around her. Her relationships, her past, the bond she had once shared with Lena and Noah, now shattered by the weight of betrayal and deceit. She wanted to run, to escape, but there was nowhere to go. And then, as if summoned by her despair, the wind shifted, rising in intensity, rustling the trees around them, carrying with it a low, mournful sound, like the sigh of the earth itself. Noah stepped forward, his hand reaching out to touch her arm. His touch was tentative, as though he feared she might pull away. But Emma didn't pull back. She just stood there, feeling the coolness of his fingers on her skin, a fleeting comfort in the storm of emotions that raged within her. "We have to finish this," he said quietly. "We have to face the forest. And we have to face what we've done." But Emma couldn't move. Her body felt heavy, as though the weight of everything was pinning her in place. She had always thought that love and trust could heal anything. But now, standing in the middle of the forest that seemed to whisper its secrets to her, she realized how wrong she had been. There were some things love couldn't fix. And now, they were all caught in the web of the forest's twisted power, bound by their choices and the secrets they had kept hidden for so long. The night had reached its darkest hour. The air hung thick with tension, as if the entire world were holding its breath. The forest, once an intimate refuge, now seemed to pulse with an unseen force. The wind had died down, leaving an eerie stillness that was only broken by the occasional rustling of branches, as though the trees themselves were whispering secrets. But there was no hiding from what was coming next. Emma stood at the edge of the clearing, her back straight, her fists clenched at her sides. Her heart beat like a drum in her chest, each thud deafening in the silence around her. Her gaze was fixed on the figure standing before her, Lena. Across from them, Noah lingered in the shadows, his presence almost invisible, like a specter haunting this fractured moment. "You knew," Emma's voice trembled, but she forced the words out, her chest tightening with every syllable. "You knew what this would do. You knew how it would end." Lena didn't respond immediately. Her eyes flickered with a mix of sorrow and something else, something darker. She took a step closer to Emma, but this time, Emma didn't step back. She couldn't. Not anymore. "Do you really think I wanted this?" Lena's voice cracked, but there was a coldness beneath it, a chilling edge that made Emma's blood run cold. "I didn't know how else to protect you, Emma. You couldn't have understood. You never would have understood. You should have trusted me," Emma shouted, the rawness in her voice echoing across the clearing. "You should have told me what you were planning. We could have fought this together." Lena's lips trembled, but she stood firm. "We were fighting this together. But you weren't strong enough, Emma. None of us were. The forest gave us power, and we couldn't walk away from it. You think I made this choice lightly?" Her eyes burned with a desperation that made Emma's heart ache. "But you lied to me." Emma's chest heaved as the weight of the words slammed into her. "You kept me in the dark. All this time, I was living in a fantasy, thinking that we were in this together. But you betrayed me. You betrayed us all." The accusation hung in the air like a thunderclap, vibrating with the weight of years of unanswered questions, of emotions unspoken. Lena's face crumpled, the mask of composure slipping as the floodgates opened. "I never wanted to hurt you," Lena whispered, her voice breaking. "But you weren't ready to face the truth. You weren't ready for what we had to do to survive. What we still have to do." Emma's stomach twisted. Every word that Lena spoke seemed to cut deeper, revealing the jagged edges of a friendship that had never been as whole as Emma had believed. "What we still have to do. You're talking about more lies, Lena?" Her voice was hoarse now, every sentence like a knife lodged in her throat. Before Lena could answer, a sharp, guttural growl broke the tension, low, rumbling, and menacing. Emma whipped around, her heart nearly stopping as she saw the trees around them begin to tremble. Something else was coming. Something dark, far darker than any of them had anticipated. From the shadows, the forest began to shift. The trees seemed to stretch, the earth cracking beneath their feet. A figure emerged from the darkness, tall, twisted, and shrouded in shadows, its form an unsettling blend of human and something more. It was the forest itself, but not as it had been before. This was its true form, its dark, ancient power, awakened and more dangerous than ever. The air seemed to throb with an ancient pulse, like the beating of a heart too old and too powerful for them to comprehend. Emma stepped back instinctively, her breath catching in her throat. "What is that?" Her voice was barely a whisper, the fear in it palpable. Lena's face hardened, and for the first time, Emma saw something else in her eyes, a grim determination. "It's what we've been running from, what we've been trying to control." The forest wasn't just a source of power, Emma. It was alive, and now it's demanding its price. Noah stepped forward from the shadows, his face grim. "It's not just the forest, Lena. It's us, all of us. We fed it. We've given it pieces of ourselves, and now it's coming to take more." Emma's mind reeled as the full weight of their betrayal sank in. They hadn't just made a pact with something dark and powerful. They had fed it. They had given up parts of themselves, their souls. Each secret, each lie, each sacrifice slowly feeding the thing that now loomed before them. "You used me," Emma whispered, her voice quivering with shock and rage. "You didn't just keep secrets. You used me to keep it alive." Lena didn't deny. The guilt was evident in her face, but there was something else there, too. Something that was too hard to put into words. "I never wanted this to happen, Emma. I thought I could control it, but I couldn't. We all couldn't." The creature moved closer, its massive form stretching across the clearing, its eyes glowing with an unsettling, otherworldly light. Emma could feel the air around her crackle, heavy with the weight of impending doom. "We have to stop it," Noah said urgently, his voice breaking through Emma's spiraling thoughts. "It's too late for us, but maybe not for the rest of the world. We have to fight back." Emma's gaze darted between him and Lena. Betrayed, broken, and on the verge of losing everything, she was being asked to fight. But could she? After everything, could she still find the strength within herself to save them? To save the world? Noah's hand reached out to her, his eyes pleading, but before she could react, the creature lunged. A rush of air swept past her, and in that moment, the ground beneath them seemed to give way. Emma's heart raced, her body instinctively moving to shield herself, but the creature was too fast. Suddenly, a sharp pain exploded in her chest. She gasped, looking down in horror to see a dark, twisted tendril of shadow piercing her. Her vision blurred, and her body went numb, but through the haze, she saw Lena's face. Her best friend's expression was one of horror, of regret, and something else. It wasn't just guilt. It was fear. "No!" Lena screamed, rushing to her side. But Emma's vision was already fading, her heart slowing as the darkness consumed her. As she felt herself slipping away, she heard Lena's voice, broken and full of anguish. "I'm sorry, Emma. I'm so sorry." The clearing was silent now. The creature, once a towering presence of darkness, had faded into the night, leaving only the faintest traces of its power. Emma's lifeless body lay sprawled on the forest floor, her eyes wide open, staring at the stars above. The air had grown cold, an unnatural chill that seemed to seep into every crevice of the world.
Lena stood beside her, trembling, her hands hovering over Emma's body as though afraid to touch it. Her eyes were bloodshot from the tears that had long since dried, and the weight of her guilt was unbearable. She had lost the only person who had ever truly understood her, the only person she had ever trusted. And for what? To save them all? To protect Emma? It felt like an impossible question to answer now. She could barely bring herself to breathe, let alone reconcile the reality of what had happened. Noah stood at a distance, his back against a nearby tree, staring into the shadows. The world around them felt empty, the echoes of their actions ringing in his ears. The weight of what they had unleashed, of what they had allowed to happen, was a burden too heavy to bear. For a long moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the soft rustle of leaves, the night shifting around them like a living thing. But the silence was not peaceful. It was filled with regret, with lost opportunities, with shattered lives. Finally, Lena spoke, Her voice was barely a whisper, as if she were speaking to herself more than to Noah. We thought we could control it. We thought we could control her, the forest, the power, everything. But it controlled us. It always did. Noah didn't turn to face her. He couldn't. He had seen enough pain to last a lifetime, and he didn't want to be the one to remind Lena of the magnitude of their failure. But he knew, deep down, that there would be no redemption for them now. There would be no fixing what they had broken. There's nothing left to fix, is there? Lena continued, her voice cracked, as though each word she spoke was tearing her apart. I thought if I kept her close, if I protected her, I could save her. I thought I could control the outcome. But in the end, it wasn't just Emma I was lying to. Noah exhaled slowly, the air thick with the weight of their shared history. He closed his eyes, feeling the bitter taste of regret in the back of his throat. It wasn't just you. We all made choices. We all played our part. Lena closed her eyes, trying to fight the surge of emotion that threatened to overwhelm her. She knelt beside Emma, brushing a hand through her hair, gently moving the strands from her face. I never wanted this, she whispered, the words broken and hollow. I thought I could control it. I thought if I kept pushing, if I kept lying, I could save her. But in the end, it was me who needed saving. The forest around them seemed to breathe in time with their grief, as if it, too, were mourning what had been lost. The shadows stretched longer, as if reaching for them, reminding them of their past mistakes, of the things they couldn't undo. Noah moved forward, slowly, cautiously, as if the weight of the moment was too much for him to bear. He stood beside Lena, staring down at Emma's body, his expression unreadable. There was nothing left to say, nothing left to do. For a long time, there was only silence between them. The air was heavy with unspoken words, with all the things that could have been, all the chances that had been missed. Finally, Lena stood up, her legs trembling beneath her. She took a deep breath and turned away from the scene, her gaze fixed on the horizon where the first light of dawn was beginning to break through the trees. The stars that had witnessed their darkest moments were slowly fading, replaced by the soft glow of a new day. Maybe this is the end, she said softly, her voice distant. Maybe it's the end of everything, but we can't just stay here. We can't let it be the end of us. Too. Noah didn't respond. Instead, he took one last look at the body of his friend, the woman who had trusted them both, and walked away. He didn't know where they were headed next. There was no map to guide them anymore, no certainty in the path ahead. The road they had been walking on had crumbled beneath their feet, and now they were left with nothing but the ashes of what had been. As they walked away from the clearing, the wind picked up again, carrying with it a faint whisper, a memory of the past, a reminder of the choices they had made. And in the distance, the trees swayed gently, as if the forest itself was mourning the loss of something it could never bring back. They had learned too late that the price of control was too high, that the lies they told to protect themselves had destroyed everything they had ever loved. But now, there was only the quiet reflection of what was lost and the understanding that the consequences of their actions would never truly fade. In the end, the forest had claimed its due, and they had learned that some things, some choices, could never be undone. As the story of Lena, Noah, and Emma comes to an end, there is much to reflect upon. The forest, with its shadows and whispers, may have claimed its due, but the true cost was not just the lives lost. It was the trust broken, the lies told, and the choices made in desperation. We've witnessed betrayal unfold in the harshest of ways, leaving characters broken, irrevocably changed by their actions. The question that lingers in the air, echoing long after the story has faded, is simple. What is the price of betrayal? What happens when secrets are kept, when trust is shattered, and when the truth comes too late to heal the wounds? Lena thought she could control it, Noah thought he could outrun it, and Emma never had the chance to see it coming. Each character's choices were born from fear. Fear of losing, fear of being vulnerable, fear of the truth. But in the end, their fear didn't protect them. It only isolated them. It only made the truth harder to face. So, I ask you, the listener, How much do we trust others in our own lives? How far do we go to protect those we love? And when faced with difficult decisions, how often do we turn a blind eye to the truths we don't want to see?